Hey guys, my name is Trick. Welcome back to Queer History Matters. Today I'm going to be doing a follow-up video to a video I made sometime in the summer. It was titled, I think it was called Ida Davis is More Than Quagmire's Dad, or something along those lines. Was going to be included with that video, but I decided to postpone it a little bit so I could have it in time for Thanksgiving. However, life happens. This is coming out the day after Thanksgiving. But happy Thanksgiving if you're from the US. And yeah, today I'm going to be talking about the Thanksgiving episode of Family Guy, which is honestly a very interesting example of trans representation in media. And I wanted to sit down and address it. So, I got my little script. I got my notes, and we're ready to get into this. So, right off the bat, the episode starts with a joke about trans women, and one of the guests brings chicken wings, and Ida goes, "Oh boy, I hope they're the kind with the bone removed." And Peter just kind of goes, which I do think is kind of funny, but I wish it was a trans woman who delivered that line. I like that they continue to draw and animate her with a strong jawline. I think it's cool to see, trans women who don't do FFS in queer media. Ida and Brian have a little bit of small talk, and Stewie is sitting next to them and makes a comment about he threw up when he found out you were a monster to Ida. And I don't even need to explain why presenting trans women as monsters is a bad idea. But yeah, that's not cool. Don't do that, guys. Interesting side note about this episode I've noticed. There are 2 lines from every other female character. I don't know if Carol has any speaking lines or not. And I don't know if Babs has any speaking lines in it, but they do make an appearance. But the 2, main characters in the main cast, Bonnie, Joe's wife, and Lois, Peter's wife, they have 2, one-liners. The first one is from Bonnie, which I'm sure we've all seen the clip, where she's just like, "This food is so fucking good, Lois." Which, to be fair, that one clip, Bonnie saying, "This food is so fucking good, Lois," and Lois being like, yeah. That one response is the only part of this episode that passes the Bechdel test. Which I think is very fucking funny, but also kind of sad. The only woman who has, lines is Ida, and she's voiced by a man, which I'm glad they changed that in the later versions, but this episode was kind of earlier in the season. I'll put the, whatever episode and season it is in the description. Family Guy's on Hulu, and there's definitely clips of this episode on YouTube. I tried to put clips of Family Guy episodes in my last video, but it got instantly flagged. So I'm hoping that y'all are able to access it, but I'm not sure how accessible this episode is. Basically, the whole main plot of this episode is Joe and Bonnie's son Kevin comes home from, what country is it? Iraq. He's away in the Iraq War, and he comes back, and he says he was in a coma, and he came back just in time for Thanksgiving. But we find out later that he's lying, but that's not relevant to this part of the story yet. So, Kevin comes home, he meets his little sister Susie, the baby that Bonnie was pregnant with at the start of Family Guy. They eat, they play football, and eventually Joe starts catching on to some of Kevin's lies about going into coma in a hospital in Kuwait. Eventually, Kevin comes clean and says that he faked his death and went AWOL. Joe begins to arrest Kevin, but Bonnie begs him not to. He says, "At first I believed in the cause, but then I saw what it was doing to the innocent people of Iraq." There's a bad explosion, and Kevin left the war, leaving his dog tags behind on the bodies of the men in the barracks with him. He traveled the entire world but missed the unconditional love of his family and his home. He describes the war as an illegal war of aggression fought 6,000 miles away from our shores. I'm not here to talk about the Iraq War. This is not relevant to my specific realm of history. However, I don't know why the fuck we're in the Middle East. It's nowhere near America. Can we focus on domestic shit, please? And also, war is bad in general. Don't do that. I don't like war of any capacity. I think it's all bad. But, it's as old as humanity itself. What are you going to do? But also, apathy is not good either. I don't know. I don't know what point I was trying to make with this. But anyway, I'm not here to debate Iraq. I'm here to debate whether or not Ida Davis is good transgender representation in Family Guy. So, I just wanted to add that in there. Carter makes a good joke. Carter is Lois's dad. He's really wealthy. He says it's better there than here where all my stuff is, which goes along with my last point. Why the fuck are we in the Middle East? Because it's not where all of our stuff is. Brian says that Iraq has nothing to do with 9/11 and it killed 500,000 Iraqis. And like I said before, I think all war is wrong. Joe and Kevin have an argument where Joe's like, your job is to follow orders, and Kevin's like, well, so did the Nazis. And then Joe's like, so you saying our troops are like Nazis? And then he's like, no, but blindly following orders is bad. But in the middle of all of this, Peter goes, I haven't talked to Carol all night. Carol, how are you? And Carol is Lois's sister, and she's one of my favorite characters in the show. But every time I'm, like, at an event and I see someone I know, but, like, I don't get to talk to them, I'm always just like, Carol, how are you? Like, across the table, I'm always referencing this bit. I think it's one of my favorite Family Guy bits. And this is a really interesting thing I thought was cool of Seth MacFarlane to do. He voices both the older versions of Ida as well as Brian. So Brian says, there's one person at this table who can understand the decision that Kevin made, and that's Ida, because she saw horrific things in horrific war and uplifts her voice as a vet herself. And when Ida actually says, no, I don't agree with that, Brian says, that's just some drag queen, and completely puts down Ida's lived experience, even though he was just uplifting her experience because of her trans identity when it didn't fit his argument. And I mean, we see examples of this with, like, Blair White and Caitlyn Jenner, where, like, I feel like right-wing circles will, like, accept especially white trans people into their circles, but then the second they say anything that they disagree with, they're like, actually, trans women are men, and trans men are women, and also I'm retarded. And I'm like, guys, you gotta stop. That's not good. Sorry, I gotta stop saying retarded, because not everyone knows that, like, I'm autistic and I'm reclaiming it. But, like, I promise I don't mean it in an offensive way. I'm sorry, guys. But yeah, Ida says, no, Brian, I do not understand Kevin's choice and I do not support it. She explains that when she was fighting, or how she thought that other soldiers should fight as well, is that you're fighting for your fellow soldiers with you, and that leaving those men in the barracks with those dog tags on their bodies was pretty much unforgivable to her. That's not like something she could forgive as a veteran herself. I love that Family Guy lets trans women have their own voice and share their own opinion. However, I really wish that she wasn't one of the only female characters who has more than 2 lines in this episode and is voiced by a man. Like, I'd really love if they made, like, another version of that episode, but maybe just, like, revoice Ida with, like, the actress who plays Ida now. I mentioned her in the first episode. I gotta double check, and I'll link her content in the doobly-doo, like the IMDb or whatever. Let me actually write that down so I don't forget. Write that down! Who voices Ida? And what episode is? Alright. That way I know what to leave you guys in the doobly-doo. Anyway, another one-liner from Lois is, if anyone wants whipped cream on your pie, I'm sorry, but I can't get a fucking word in edgewise, which is hilarious. Joe continues to go arrest Kevin because he's the one Swanson man who does his duty. But Kevin says, that's not how I remember it. And then Kevin has a flashback to the first grade where he's going on a ride along with Joe in his cop car. He let a thief get away to feed his family because he stole 1 can of tomato soup. Joe says, there's been a mistake. I'm not here to arrest your father. The law is just a piece of paper. There's right, there's wrong, and somewhere in between, there's life. Kevin reminds Joe that he broke the law and did what he thought was right. I thought that was really interesting that's how that episode wrapped up, and I like seeing the different points of views and the different jokes that Family Guy added in. But like I said, I'd love if I love that they recast Ida's voice actor. I'm really happy that they let the trans woman have her own opinion. I wish some of the other female characters got to talk. Oh, I didn't get this joke till, like, recently, because I've seen this episode, like, half a dozen times, and, like, while Kevin and Joe are having this, like, argument and these flashbacks and shit, Peter just goes, thank you for coming. It sucks how early I have to work. I didn't realize he was, like, kicking them out. I thought he was just saying, well, I'm glad you guys came. Damn, I don't want to go to work tomorrow. And, like, that's so funny as somebody who actually is working the day after Thanksgiving and has been for the last couple of years, but didn't have to when I was younger. I think it's really funny, and that's a joke that kind of, like, went over my head when I was a kid. Then, after their argument, they all sit down and eat pumpkin pie, and they all say Happy Thanksgiving from everyone to everyone. And as they're all sitting down to eat this pumpkin pie, another person who looks like Kevin comes in and says, that man's an imposter, I'm the real Kevin. Cuts to Peter. It's like, we don't have time for this. Episode ends. Goes black. So I think that's a pretty interesting episode of Family Guy. Hope you guys enjoyed my little summary. River is away with family right now because it's Thanksgiving. But hopefully they'll be sending me a little video with their input, and I'll upload that. It's like a little bit of a bonus content. Until then, I'm Trick. Thank you so much for watching Queer History Matters. I'll see y'all in the next one.